Hey everybody, this is the Sliders Review, and I'm here today to talk to you about a very beloved show that I loved growing up when I was a kid and teenager. A show that was like monumental, that so many other young kids loved. And that show is called Ghostwriter. But I know what you must be thinking, which Ghostwriter? Because there are actually three Ghostwriter shows. There is the original one from 1992 to 1995 that aired on PBS, which is by far the superior Ghostwriter. And then there are two reboots that are not so spectacular. There is the 1997 reboot known as the New Ghostwriter Mysteries, and the newest one that occurred in 2019, simply named Ghostwriter, that aired on, well, is currently airing on Apple Plus. Let me just tell you right here and right now that these two reboots do not hold a candle to the original one. Which is ironic because the original one is beyond outdated. It is outdated in technology, slang, clothes, just the entire era, because it was the early 90s. And it was back in the time when you had a computer and really the only thing you can do on it is just type or play video games on it. And although the 1997 one that aired on CBS, the Canadian version one, wasn't that great, it's a whole lot better than the 2019 one that's also filmed in Canada, and it shows on Apple Plus. The new version, the 2019 one, it's not Ghostwriter. Let's just put it like that. Like, I don't know why they called it Ghostwriter. It has really nothing to do with the whole premise of the first two Ghostwriter shows, and it's beyond different. All right. The best way I can sum it up is the Fantastic Beast and Where to Find Them meets pretty much any magic show. Let's just put it like that. Any kids magic show. Now, I'm not saying that the 2019 is like strictly like terrible bad by any means. What I'm saying is, it's not Ghostwriter. It's just not Ghostwriter. It's just not Ghostwriter. Like, you could literally name it something completely different, which I don't know why the creators didn't, because it's not Ghostwriter. That'll be like, say, you wanted to create a show called Xena Warrior Princess, and instead it's set in the year 3000 with all this cool scientific technology, and she's a baker. And that's it. As opposed to a woman in the Greek mythology days with like a sword, riding a horse, fighting people, stuff like that. Now, as for the 2019 series, even though it's not like a completely bad series, I don't get it because they really don't set out to do the message that they say they're gonna do. And so it's like, it's very centered towards young kids. Like the demographic, well, the kids on the show are anywhere between the ages of probably say 7 to 10. So it's for kids like that. So I stop and ask myself, why is this show even made for them? Like, what do kids know about Ghostwriter? That was about 2 decades ago. Like, that makes no sense. If you was to ask a kid that's around 5 to 10 years old and you ask them what Ghostwriter is, they're probably going to assume they're thinking of that Marvel hero Ghost Rider, not Ghostwriter. Because the older Ghostwriter series is not on streaming. It is on DVD, but they don't really make copies no more. Now, in order to buy it, you have to go online where all the vultures have it up to $100 to $200. Why do they have it for $100 and $200? Because it's that good of a series. Now, every episode technically is on YouTube, but when you used to read the comments, because you don't read them no more because now it's set for kids. But when I was rewatching it on YouTube, The only people commenting are people that are my age, that are in their like 30s and 40s, because we're the ones who grew up watching this show. So it's kind of weird that they will make a show like this for kids. Now, of course, there's chances are a kid probably stumbled across it on YouTube. There's a good chance that the parents talked about this show or let them watch old reruns on a VHS or a DVD. So that's the good possibility. But so if they're going to do that and the kids end up liking it, why not just make it like the original one as opposed to what they're doing now? Because when I say this is made for kids, I mean this is made for kids. It feels like a more mature Nickelodeon show with like a splash of like Disney into it, which is what a lot of new modern Disney Channel and Nickelodeon shows are doing right now. There's actually a modern day Nickelodeon show. It's a UK one from Australia. Um, it's a magic show, teen one, and they were supposed to have a second season, but the virus happened, so they got postponed. But now I think they are filming the second season. I can't wait. It's actually a pretty good show. I forget the actual title. I think it's called the Bureau of Magical Things or something like that. But it's a pretty interesting show. But it's also a magic show and it's a teen show, but it's mature, So Nickelodeon is trying to go on that kind of level, but it's an imported Nickelodeon International show. And if they really want to make a good kids show, they could have made it similar to Just Add Magic. That's a really good show on Amazon Prime. It deals with kids and teens, it deals with magic, and it's a whole lot more mature than the 2019 Ghostwriter reboot. Now, I know what you must be asking yourself. Well, what exactly makes the original one so good, so spectacular, that the 2019 reboot and the 1997 reboot aren't? Well, it's time to tell you. See, the original one aired on PBS, and it aired from 1992 to 1995, and it lasted for all of 3 seasons, with a total of 74 episodes, but they're not episodic. In fact, there are 18 story arcs, and each story contains 4 episodes, but 2 of them contain 5 episodes. The first season had 34 episodes, the second season had 28 episodes, and the last season, which is the worst season, had 12 episodes. And when I say the last season was terrible, I mean it was terrible. They started recasting a bunch of people. They started adding a whole bunch of new characters that were younger, because the older cast were becoming teenagers and they were getting tall. And so when they tried to steer it more towards kids with the younger characters, they made it very gooberish, and it was just bad. And they ran out of funding because it's a PBS show. The whole premise of Ghostwriter is having a group of kids, and they are able to see this ghost. Now, the ghost never looks like a ghost. It's just a weird, cartoony, kiddish looking thing. It's just like a little circle with 2 little comma lines that's above it, kind of like eyebrow type things. It's just a weird design, but it's a cool design. So it really grabs your attention. And it bounces around, and the thing is, this ghost isn't like other ghosts that you would see in other TV shows. It cannot move stuff. It cannot talk to you. It cannot make noise. And also, it cannot hear you. It can only communicate by words. Yes, that's right. It only talks to you in the form of writing to you. But the unique thing about this thing is that when it writes to you, it can only use letters that's around it. So say it has something important to tell you, or just tell you any old thing, right? And say you don't have that many letters in your room or on a sheet of paper or wherever it is that you're using. It can only use those set letters to communicate with you. which means it leaves gaps if it doesn't have enough letters. And that happens all the time in this show, especially when it's something important, like a street address or like the name of somebody. So then it's up to the kids to fill in the blanks. And they have to fill in the blanks by one, using their brain, two, because the internet wasn't the way it was back then. They had to like use phone books, encyclopedias. They had to do their real research, like gumshoe type stuff. However, like I said, it can only use words that are nearby it. But if it's in a computer, then it has access to all the words it wants. I don't understand how that works because there's not tons of letters inside the computer. And the keyboard is very limited to having only one letter. So, but you know, this is back in the old 90s. So I guess they assume, oh, if you can type however many words you want on a computer, you know, then there must be like tons of like letters and stuff. It was old school tech, all right. It was back then people, when the internet was first invented, they were like, well, what's the internet? But the 2019 reboot is completely different. Now, Ghostwriter has the ability to move objects, which is something he could never do in the other two series. Also, this Ghostwriter in the 2019 reboot can write whatever word he wants at any point in time, no matter if there are no words around him or what. So it takes away that fun aspect of the original ones where he was only limited to a certain amount of words. And it made the plots better. It made the situation better, especially when it was a dire situation. Because in the original one, the kids were in a dire situation like all the time. But now, since Ghostwriter is just able to move objects and write stuff as will, it just takes away that level of drama and suspense. Now, I know what you must be asking yourself. Well, if Ghostwriter can only communicate by words in the original one, and he cannot see, he cannot hear, how does, like, you know, he know where all the kids be at that he hangs around with? Because only a certain group of people can see Ghostwriter. He only allows certain people, not just anybody. Well, he sums this up by saying he can feel their heart. So wherever they're at, all he has to do is sense for their heartbeat and he can find them. How? Like, I don't know. But it's just a nice sentiment, you know, because he's really connected to these group of kids. Because one thing about the original one is that when we first meet Ghostwriter, he meets a kid named Jamal Jenkins, which is the ipso facto leader of the Ghostwriter team. When Jamal is clearing away some stuff in his attic, Ghostwriter is hiding inside a book. And then he makes himself known to Jamal when he's in Jamal's room. And he's on the computer, so he's able to type whatever he wants. And one of the first messages that he says is, where are the children? Are the children okay? I have to know if the children are okay. We as viewers didn't know what this meant, but the creator of the show did, and he later revealed why Ghostwriter is so adamant about children and why he only lets kids see him and why he only wants to help kids. His purpose in life is just to help kids. Now let's put a pin in that for a little bit later. In the 1997 reboot, which a lot of people consider a sequel to the PBS one, there's no explanation whatsoever that gives why Ghostwriter likes hanging around kids. There's no explanation as to why he's even helping these new group of kids, because it's a completely different group. There's no explanation as to why he went from Brooklyn, New York in the first series to going all the way to Canada in the second one. In the 2019 reboot, once again, there's no indication whatsoever. None whatsoever as to why only kids can see him, because only these 4 group of kids can see him. However, the first message he sends them is "help me," which freaks the kids out. And we don't know why Ghostwriter needs help, because in this series he barely talks to them. Now, in the original series, there's a group of kids. One name's Jamal, the other is Lenny, the third is Alex. Then there's Alex's sister Gabby, which is short for Gabrielle. There's Gabby's friend Tina. The new kid Rob. Rob was cool. Rob was probably like my favorite. Rob reminded me of Tommy from Power Rangers when he did the whole Green Ranger thing, because, you know, Rob was like the new kid. He just wanted to be left alone. He was nice, but he had a little bit of edge to him and stuff. And then just like with Tommy, he ends up leaving. And then there's Hector. Nobody likes Hector. Nothing against the actor, but it was just the character. He was annoying. He was whiny. He was stupid. And then there's Casey, which is Jamal's cousin, and she's more annoying than Hector is, because she's a whole lot younger. And then in the 3rd season, the actress who plays Gabby, she decided that she didn't want to be an actress no more. The whole fame was just too much for her. Because when I said that kids love this show, they love this show. They probably saw her in public, swarmed her, and did like the whole fandom thing. So she left. And then they replaced her with a new Gabby actress. And the new one, they did more stuff with her in the 3rd season to get fans to like her. However, they didn't do a good job of making fans like her, because fans was not having no replacement of any kind, which happens in a lot of shows. When they replace characters, they don't want them replaced. This is Craig. Craig is from the original pilot. For some reason, he didn't show up in the new pilot or anywhere in the new series. Pretty much, he's kind of like Rob. He's good at writing. He helps the kids out, trying to like free Jamal. And then towards the very end of the episode, he's able to see Ghostwriter. And so, like, okay, with this first series, the group of kids, they all didn't meet Ghostwriter at the same time. They actually met him at individual times. Like I said before, Jamal was the first one to see him, and it completely freaked him out. And so it's at the point where he just turns off his computer, because Ghostwriter was inside his computer. And he thinks by turning it off, Ghostwriter's going to go away. And at this point in time, he doesn't even know it's a ghost. He just sees this weird thing typing to him. And then towards the end, you know, when he turns the computer off, he leaves. But then, of course, Ghostwriter just follows him and goes inside his book bag. So in a way, Jamal is walking around at night because he just came back from the grocery store. Yeah, kids used to do that in the 90s. You could walk around at night, go to the grocery store, and nothing could happen to you. It's not like that anymore. So he's coming back from the grocery store, and he sees this strange people acting in a park. They're like all wrestling with each other, fake playing, all that weird stuff. However, these people are having flashlights in their hands, and they're wearing these strange demonic masks that has 2 faces on them. So it's kind of weird, and he sees them and they see him. So then when he leaves, he goes back for like a split second, and now they've gone. So they know who he is and stuff. So, like, you know, the next day he goes back to that park area where he's trying to like look for him. And as he's searching, because you know they've been long gone, but he's searching for like stuff, and he finds 2 objects that are clues. He finds a button pen that says the word Babto on it, and he finds a note on blue sheets of paper, and is written in this strange language, which he at first thinks is a foreign language. But then later on, him and somebody else determined that it might actually be code. So then he bumps into a girl named Lenny. He doesn't know her at all, but he's seen her around school. Lenny is a very kind of like out there type girl when she dresses. She doesn't like to dress one way. She likes to dress sometimes as a regular kid, sometimes as a grown woman, a hippie, a woman from Africa, I don't know why, and a ghetto black rapper. Sometimes she dresses like she's French. Like the girl just has like a unique style. Like she's very out there because they're from New York. And from what I've heard, New York is a very cultural type place, which a lot of people were surprised when they watched the show Friends and they were very white. Now Lenny's all about music. She loves music. She loves to sing. She loves to rap, all that kind of stuff. And so when she bumps into Jamal, they've seen each other around school, but they don't know each other. And when they meet and they interact and they're talking and they're getting to know each other, Lenny is a blushing. Like you can tell she is crushing, which I've always shipped those two because they're always together, they're always hanging out. She's blushing like nonstop, and he's just being kind of like the cool, whatever kind of guy and stuff. And but nothing ever happened between those two because he ended up dating another girl. And so after, he's talking to her and then he ends up leaving because they have to go to school, stuff like that. And she's working on one of her raps and she's writing it down. And Ghostwriter, who was in Jamal's book bag, slipped into her book bag. And then Ghostwriter started reading her lyrics. And Ghostwriter likes that. He thinks that she's on the right path of life, he tells her, which freaks her out because she's like, oh my God, how are these words moving? So then she later confronts Jamal at school and asks him, like, how'd you do it? How'd you make my words move and stuff like that? Because Ghostwriter, when he sends her a message, he sends her a second message with the word Jamal's name in it. Because, okay, when Jamal was at the computer, Jamal was pretty much just typing to himself and talking to himself. Because back then, like I said, you couldn't do nothing with a computer other than just type and play video games. So Jamal was talking about, hi Jamal, how are you? I'm a dynamite kid. So Ghostwriter read that, remember that, sent that to Lenny. So when Lenny saw that, she's all like, that's how she knew that this thing was connected to Jamal. So they start talking and he doesn't know where this thing came from and stuff like that. And then they realize that they're the only two people who can see it. None of the other kids at school can see it. None of the teachers can see it as the words are moving around and stuff. Well, at this point in time, Jamal ends up getting a note on his locker. And it's in that same blue construction paper that he found that strange note. However, this note isn't strange. It's in regular English. And it's a threatening note. Because the people that saw him, they know who he is. They know what school he goes to. And they pretty much tell him like to back off. And stay out of their business. And so, then those two become friends. And they start hanging out a lot more. And when they're hanging out, they're trying to determine, what this weird thing is that keeps talking to them. And so, they realize, Ghostwriter starts talking to him on Jamal's computer again. And so they're talking to him, asking him questions. And Ghostwriter at this point is getting frustrated. And he's constantly talking about, like, why aren't you answering me? Because he's trying to talk to them and they're talking back. But like I said before, they can't, or he cannot hear them because he can only talk to them, but they don't know that yet. So he's getting pissed. He's all like, answer me, answer me, answer me. Why won't you talk to me? And so they're getting scared at this moment because they don't know what this thing is. And he's getting pissed at them. And so they later realize that, every time this thing talks to them, it only writes to them. So Jamal figures out that, maybe, just maybe, this thing can only communicate through words and stuff. So that's how they start communicating with him. And so, like, they start asking him a bunch of questions because they're very curious. And, they ask him, like, what are you? Are you an alien or are you human? And so, Ghostwriter responds, I used to be a person, but now I'm not. And then they ask, well, where'd you come from? And Ghostwriter's like, I don't know. And they're like, well, what's your name? And he's like, I don't know. Because he doesn't remember at all. Because he's been trapped in that book for so long. And so he asked them, like, where are you at? And they explain, they're from, like, New York City and Earth and stuff like that. And he's just kind of like, okay. Like, he's never heard of New York City before. Now, I forgot to mention, the reason why he started talking to him in Jamal's room is because Jamal's grandmother, she had a grocery list. And on her grocery list, she had cornflakes on there. And so Ghostwriter, he reads this and he literally asks the two kids, what are cornflakes? Because he doesn't know. Because from where he's from, he's never had cornflakes. He's never heard of New York. He's never heard of Brooklyn. And so they're kind of like confused. They don't understand why he doesn't know what none of this stuff is. And he tells them, he feels sad, he feels lonely, and stuff like that. And then he starts like fading away because he just leaves because he's just like really like lonely and sad and stuff. So they like beg to him, like, stay and they'll talk to him. They'll keep him company. And so they start to build like a rapport. And Jamal figures out that, well, if this thing used to be a person and no longer, then he must be like dead and like a ghost. And Lenny's kind of like, well, since he's able to write to us, why don't we call him Ghostwriter? Because he doesn't remember what his name is and they need something to call him. And it makes sense, he's a ghost that writes to them. So that's how they get the cool nickname of Ghostwriter and stuff. And so, like, and Ghostwriter likes that name, and then they start talking to him. And they really do talk to him. Like, they keep him company. They find a bunch of books on New York, and they let him read that. And, and they have like a good rapport. Like, they're constantly back and forth, like, communicating with each other. They're making each other feel, like, welcome, you know what I'm saying? And they're growing to be, like, really good friends. Now, in the 1997 reboot, there is no origin story. They just go straight into it. And somehow Ghostwriter knows these kids. And with the 1997 reboot, the only time they ever talk to Ghostwriter is when they need something. Like, I kid you not. They never like check in on him saying like, hey, how you doing? Hey, you wanna know what this is? Stuff like that. They constantly just like boss him around. They're constantly like, hey, we need you to go and read what's in this kid's book bag, or we need you to go and look for these words and tell us what you know, or look for this street address and blah, 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 blah. Like, they never talk to him. They literally just like boss him around. He's literally just like their pet, and their servant type thing. Now, the 2019 reboot, once again, nobody talks to him. Like, they don't have that rapport. It's just because for some bizarre reason, Ghostwriter barely talks to them. When he does, he writes like only like one or two words, like help me or something like that. Or like he'll hand them something, or he'll direct them to like a book. Because one thing I forgot to mention about the 2019 series, because I'm trying to like bop back and forth to like all the three of them, is the 2019 series, this Ghostwriter brings characters and objects from books to life. Yeah. This is not Ghostwriter. Ghostwriter does not do that. Ghostwriter did not do this in any other two series. Why they chose this route, I have no idea. But yes, he brings objects from books and characters, mostly characters, alive from books. And he doesn't always pick the nicest characters. Sometimes he picks, for the majority of the time, the meanest characters. Like the Queen of Hearts from Alice in Wonderland. And so, because of that, they don't communicate with Ghostwriter that much. They don't even really know who he is. In the new reboot, he talks to them one time, says, help me, and that's it. So they assume, and since he's moving stuff around, they're like, oh, well, he must be a ghost. And since he's writing to us, he must be Ghostwriter. And it's just like, that's how they came up with that. In just like a few seconds, it took the original cast 2 episodes to figure that out. 2. And it took them just a few seconds. In this show, like I said before, they only have 4 kids. There's Ruben. He's the new guy at school, and he's very like shy and doesn't have no friends. And Ghostwriter mostly like communicates with him through like movement and stuff like that. So I guess you could say he's like the leader, kind of like how Jamal was in the original one. Just like Jamal, okay, Jamal has a grandma that he lives with. He also lives with his parents. And Ruben, he lives with his mom and his grandfather. Now, with the latest reboot series, there is a character named Siobhan. Now, she's the smart girl. She's not really based off anybody in the original series that I can find. Because in the original series, there really wasn't no like high-strung, feminist, like smart girl or smart character in that original series. Donna. She's the youngest of the group. Now, Donna and Curtis, they cannot get along whatsoever because they're brother and sister, you know? And Donna reminds me of Gabby. And Curtis reminds, because she's so sweet and innocent, and she's really caring and nice, and that's who Gabby was. Curtis reminds me of Alex. They both play basketball. They're the cool kid. He doesn't like his sister, stuff like that. And that's how like Alex and like Gabby was in the series. They could never get along. They were brother and sister. Alex was like the basketball player, and Gabby was just so sweet and innocent. Another parallel that this show has is that it's diverse. That's a very good similarity that the original one had, because Siobhan is black, Ruben he looks Hispanic, and then Donna, she's white, and Curtis, I have no idea. So it's nice to see a show that has diversity in it, which is a strong parallel to the original one. Because in the original one, Jamal's black, Gabby and Alex are Mexican. Rob, I don't know, in one episode he's get called a white boy, but I'm pretty sure Rob is like Jewish or something like that, but I'm not really sure. Tina, she's Vietnamese. Hector, he's Mexican. Casey, she's black. And Lenny, she's like the only real like white person in the entire show. And it was really unique to see like an extremely diverse cast back in the 90s, because you know how TV is. And so this was a kid's show on top of that. So that was like really cool to see that diversity in the show. And I used to see that like in Power Rangers, but that was Power Rangers, It was like in the TV shows, just in general, you just don't see that. So that's like a really nice thing that they did. And these kids, they were never stereotypes in the original series. Yeah, they look different and they sound different, but they were never like the stereotypical stuff you see nowadays on TV. Jamal was never ghetto. Lenny wasn't no preppy girl. Alex, I don't know how Hispanics are portrayed on TV because you really don't see them that much. Tina, she wasn't like the smart girl or the martial artist. She was just an ordinary girl who liked journalism and stuff. Now with the 1997 reboot, that show was not diverse at all. They only had one black character, and she was half black and half white, and the other two characters, they were white. Now in this show, I don't know who the leader of the group was. It's never really explained. However, I've noticed that with the one girl, her name is Camilla. Pretty much every episode revolved around her, except for like a few that revolved around the other ones. But pretty much everything revolved around her. So maybe she's the leader of the group. I have no idea. Her personality, she doesn't, like, I don't know. They all have pretty much the same personality. Like, she's just a nice girl. She's a little bit of a prep and stuff. Then there's Emily. She's just a character on the show. Like, she's just a nice girl. there's really no like explaining her personality, to tell you the truth. She's nice, she's a bit headstrong. That's really it. And then there's Henry Strickland, which they just call him Strict. He's the only one who has like a really different personality. He's nice just like the other one, but he used to be a bad boy back in the day. So he gets in a little bit more arguments with the girls, and he doesn't like it when they judge like people who have like a bad past. They know he has a bad past, but they don't care. Um, that's pretty much like just the core group. That's like it. Like there's no new characters, and they all have the same personalities, and for the most part they don't act like they have any chemistry with each other. I mean, when they are hanging out, they're hanging out and they're having a good time, but there's no like real bond. And with the original series, there was a huge bond with them. Like they had such great chemistry. They acted like normal kids. They would interact with each other like the way normal kids would. They had like a stupid secret handshake when they formed their team, you know? And it's just like everything flows so nicely with those original kids that you can tell like why they was cast. You can tell that they're a group of friends. With the 2019 reboot, um, I don't feel the chemistry at all. Like I know Siobhan and Ruben supposed to know each other, but you really can't tell sometimes. Now, with the whole Donna and Curtis thing, they're brother and sister, so they argue like one. So that's the chemistry I see there. But other than that, they kind of feel like just four complete strangers and stuff. Oh, there's something I forgot to mention. In the original series, there are two pilots, and both of them actually air back to back, tell you the truth. Which it gets kind of confusing because they're both origin stories. So it's like after you see the original one that got the air, you see how the gang gets together. Then you see the second one, and the gang gets back together again, and they're younger. Now the second pilot that aired, which is the original one, it's fine. Like it's great. Like it deals with Jamal being set up for arson. He's accused of it. See, he argued with this store owner, and then he wrote that store owner a note, and he put it underneath the door. So that's all on camera. Next thing you know, during that night, the building gets set on fire. And so when the store owner was talking to the cops, he's all like, I bet it was that one kid Jamal, because me and him got into an argument, and and that would bring Jamal closer together with the rest of the group of kids that I mentioned before, because they're trying to help him. They don't know him, but they're trying to help him. And so, with the help of Ghostwriter, this and that, they're able to solve the crime. And Jamal's dad in both pilots is played by Samuel L. Jackson. Now, this time I didn't know who Samuel L. Jackson was, but I know who he is now. And there's a scene in the second pilot where Samuel's all like he gets mad. He gets out of a cop car and he's just shouting at Jamal, you know? And it's just like, it's classic Samuel L. Jackson. He doesn't use no cuss words, but he means business. To the point where you can tell he wants to take off that belt. And so, back with the first episode of the original series. So, after Jamal and Lenny discover what Ghostwriter is, and they're talking to him and stuff, now they want to decipher that code because they're just so curious. And Lenny tells him that, there's only one guy she knows who's really good at breaking codes, and that's a guy named Alex. And she knows him, not personally, but, she goes to his store, which is called the Bodega, which that's just Spanish for store, which I didn't know that, but that was kind of cool knowing that, back in the day, ooh, you know what I'm saying? And so, so then he goes and he finds Alex. And this is the first time him and Alex have ever talked. They see each other at school, but that's about it. And when those two start talking, they're bonding over superheroes and stuff. And they're just really connecting. And so you can feel that friendship firsthand. And so he's talking about codes and this and that, and Alex is all like, he's the best there is when it comes to cracking the code, and he'll teach him and stuff. And because Alex is related to Gabby, that's how she gets pulled into the group. See, what happens with Gabby is this. Earlier, Gabby and Alex were walking to school, and she went to go tie her shoe. He goes around the corner. At that time, somebody comes around the corner dressed in that demonic mask thing that I told you about, and they stole her book bag and they ran off with it. She tells her parents that this has been going on with a lot of kids at school. A lot of kids have been having their book bags stolen, and they haven't really gotten them back. Her dad's really upset, and they don't understand why these people are doing that. Now, these people are the same people who threatened Jamal and sent him that note and was acting weird in the park. So there's a connection with that. With 1997 reboot, we don't know what brought these three kids together. Like, we have no idea because there's no origin story. There's no flashback. They're just a group of kids that are automatically friends and automatically talk to Ghostwriter. And not only that, because they have all the same personalities and the same traits, we don't know what makes them special. And the same can kind of be said with the 2019 reboot. However, each kid does have a different personality and a different trait. Siobhan is the smart one. So you'd think she'll be able to crack codes and this and that. Well, they don't do that on this show. Let's put a pin in that later. So back with the original series, him and Alex, they're in their room, and Alex is teaching him everything he knows about codes. You can use you can replace letters with numbers, you can replace letters with other letters, you can do the whole backwards letters thing. And and that was really cool to learn as a kid, because it's kind of I never knew that. And that's something they did all the time, and in spy type stuff and detective type stuff, when people don't want you to know what they're saying, they will write in code. And it was just a really cool feature that the show would teach kids. And that's what made the show interesting, because we learned that there's so many mysteries going around, and these kids are literally solving them on the original series. That is what their whole purpose and goal is to do. There's always something strange going on in town, and they have to solve it. And so Gabby comes in and she tells her brother that one of her friends at school tells her that she found her book bag at some kind of abandoned junkyard, and she believes that her book bag might be there too. And also, her friend, when those mask people, one of their masks fell off and one girl saw them, and so one of the girls know exactly what the person looks like. So Alex, her, and Jamal, they all go to the junkyard. And when they're there, now at this point in time, Alex doesn't know anything about Ghostwriter, neither does Gabby. And so when they're at the junkyard, they find Gabby's book bag. And so she leaves because she wants to go to her friend Tina's house. So when she leaves, Ghostwriter decides he's going to talk to Alex. And it freaks Alex out because, it freaks everybody out when they see him. And right before Jamal, he explains what Ghostwriter is, and Alex thinks it's really cool, and he's like, oh, this is so cool, we have a little secret friend that can help us get answers on the test and blah 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 blah, stuff like that. But Ghostwriter tells him he ain't gonna do that. Anyway, before they leave, Jamal sees somebody else's book bag, and there's words on there, and these words are familiar to Jamal because what happened was, so when Jamal's in his room and he's talking to Ghostwriter, Ghostwriter sees the word Thapto, which is that same button that Jamal found. And, he asks Ghostwriter, where'd you see this from? And he's all like, and then what is it? Ghostwriter has some more words. The words don't make no sense to Jamal. He don't understand why the Ghostwriter said Thapto and these other words. And then Jamal realizes, oh, he must be reading this Thapto button on another person who has this, and he asked him, where is this person located at? But Ghostwriter really can't find out because he can't see. But I think he gives address or something like that. And so when he sees those words, he remembers that Ghostwriter sent those to him before. And he realized that Ghostwriter must have seen or must have been around when that crime was happening, when that kid book bag got stolen. And Jamal tells him that, tells Alex that he believes that this whole Thapto thing and the book bags being stolen and these little coded notes, they must all be connected somehow. So they try to figure out how with the help of Lenny. And so as all three of them are in their room trying to figure it out, they tell Ghostwriter, can he like go around all around town and look for everything that has the word Thapto on it and try to figure out where, these buttons and stuff came from. Well, it is determined that it came from a place called the Party Animal. And so when they go there, they're greeted by Calvin. Now, Calvin is the bully of the show. He is this rich little smug kid who thinks he's all that. He's mean, he's rude, and he's mildly racist. And they show it on the show. And so while they're in there in his store, Ghostwriter's searching around, and they ask him, can you give us a list of all the people who asked for this Thapto button to be printed out? Because they're made to order and stuff, these special buttons. And Calvin's not going to do it. But Ghostwriter goes into like his little, database type thing, find the receipts, and he finds a name and a phone number. And he gets it to the kids. Well, the kids determine, they're going to call this number up and pretend to be Calvin on the phone from the Party Animal and try to figure out, who these people are, what Thapto is, why they had these buttons made, undercover type stuff. And this is kind of cool because it's kind of like, wow, these kids are taking the initiative. They're doing this whole detective undercover type stuff. Because this is what this kind of show is. It's a young detective show where these kids are like fighting bad guys and all kinds of bad guys. And when they're talking to the person on the phone, the person does not want to talk to him. But Jamal is trying his best, to like stay on the phone with this person. And the person pretty much hangs up really fast. But they are able to determine that there are 4 members in the group. So like with each episode, they're getting like closer and closer to figuring out who these people are. They're getting like little snippets, little clues. And that's what was so great about this show, because it is a detective type show, a crime type show. And Alex teaches the kids, how to gather all this information. So he teaches them how to create a case book where you have like your suspects and the clues and all kind of stuff, right? And he teaches them how to like jot it down. And that was just so cool as a kid seeing that on the show, because who didn't want to do that? And so many kids imitated that. They will buy little binder folders that look exactly like the ones they had on Ghostwriter. And one thing the show encouraged, because it was a learning show, they would tell you, break out your casebook and write down the stuff that we write down and blah, blah, stuff like that. And, we did that as a kid. It was an interactive type thing. With the 1997 CBS reboot, there are no casebooks. There are like whatever clues you learn, you have to just remember in your head. There is no interaction. It took away that fun. Having a case book, it's kind of like having a tricorder on Star Trek. It's just a nice little prop, And when that show eliminated that feature, it really robbed the show of, what Ghostwriter was about. And the same can be said with the 2019 reboot. There are no case books. There are no detective, like crime type stuff to solve, because in this reboot, they don't solve crimes at all. Let's put a pin in that later. And so back with the original one, some time passes and Gabby introduced Tina to Jamal, because Alex already knows her. And when Alex sees her, he's crushing on her. And it's a one-way crush. He's older than her. She's like in middle school. He's in high school. And you can really tell that they're crushing. So Gabby, she's teasing him about that and stuff. So at some point in time, Ghostwriter goes back to the team because he found another Thapto word. And he has these strange words and numbers with him as he's giving the kids the message. And the kids don't know where they've seen that from. So when they're in school, they're walking around and then they realize, oh wait, the word that was written with the whole Dapto thing goes with a locker name, like the company that the locker is made from. And the number is the locker number. So since it's at their school, they go to see whose locker it is. So Alex stakes it out and he sees a kid goes there. And he follows this kid and he starts spying on this kid. And the kid goes to the arcade because he knows he's seen this kid from somewhere, but he doesn't remember where. And so when he's at the arcade, as he's spying, he sees that this kid is hanging out with 3 other kids. And we know that they're 4th Apto people. And they're playing a game called the Double Defenders. Now, the Double Defenders is a made-up superhero group of these superheroes that have 2 heads. Hence, the Thaptos having a double-sided mask, a head in the front and a head in the back. So Alex tells the others this, and you know, they now trying to figure out why exactly they're these kids are stealing book bags and stealing people money. Because I forgot to mention, when Gabby finds her book bag, she's told from the other girl who found her book bag is that everything was in the book bag except for her money, her lunch money. So now they're trying to figure out why these 4 kids are stealing people's book bags, but only taking the money and not nothing else in there. So the gang knows that they have to figure out that code because it could probably explain why they're stealing people's lunch money. Because like I said before, you know, they will steal people's book bags, they'll steal the lunch money out of it, but they won't take anything else. So Alex helps the gang and they're able to decipher the code. Well, most of it, not the last 3 words. It takes them a good while to figure that out. But at this point in time, because Gabby is now helping the group and she's helping out with words and this and that, and he feels safe around Gabby, he exposes himself to Gabby. So now she's the 4th member of the group. Now, Gabby also has a coded message in her book bag. See, every time the gang, the little street gang people, they steal a book bag, they leave a note inside it. So when people come and find their stuff, they'll, you know, have a nice little message for them. But they can't decipher the message because people don't know what this code is. Because unlike Jamal, they wrote in code. So then once they decipher the code, you know, it's pretty much just a ha ha ha, I got your, like, I stole your stuff and this and that and got away with it and stuff like that. It's just like a little taunting message that Gabrielle has now. And so later on, they decipher the rest of the code. And as they decipher the rest of the code, Jamal figures that, you know, the best way to figure out why Dapto likes the Double Defender so much, they need to, like, read up on it. So he starts to read up on it. But, you know, it's too much for him because there's so many books. So the other kids try to help, but it's too much for them too. So then they ask Ghostwriter to read through the books. And Ghostwriter can, like, speed read. So Ghostwriter has like all this knowledge now of like the Double Defenders. And so when they decipher the rest of the code, it turns out that the coded message that Jamal found in the park is instructions to go to their next ceremony meeting. But there's no time on there. And so the kids are kind of like, okay, they know when and where they're going to be at. They just don't know what time they're going to be at. So when Ghostwriter reads all the stuff throughout the books, they ask him, you know, to determine the time must be somewhere in the books. At a certain time, Double Defenders always meet, and Ghostwriter gives them that information. So they go into the page that he tells them to go on in the book, and they determine that the Double Defenders always have their meetings at a certain time. So the kids determine, okay, they're so close to find out these people. Now they need to prove that these people stole their money. So they're going to have one of them infiltrate the group. But in order to do that, one member has to go missing. So they determine they will send a fake note to the one Dapto person whose locker they know of. So they write their own coded message. But before they write a coded message, they write it out in plain English. Well, that message is way too long because Daptos like to talk really short. So they say, okay, we need to just keep the important stuff in the message and take out all the stuff that's unnecessary. That sounds too formal. And I remember when I learned that, I was like, oh, that's a cool little thing to learn, because I didn't learn that in school. Like, you just learn when you write everything that's important. But sometimes you have to like shorten and condense your stuff because it's too wordy. This helps me out a lot when I'm on Twitter ranting about something. Because I don't want to put it in a thread, so I want like the shortest message possible. And so every time I'm like, okay, well, I need to take out what's not important, I'm always reminded of Ghostwriter teaching me that. Which is something you don't get in the other series at all. So they write their little coded message and they send it to that one Thapto person, and it works. So the kids are now spying on the location of where the Thapto is going to be at. It's kind of like this abandoned junkyard type place, abandoned building type thing. And so Alex is going to be the one to infiltrate them. And he has a mask just like those because he bought them from the party animal. Now, how he knew what the jackets will look like, I don't know. But anyway, so they're spying, which is something these kids do a lot in this TV show. These kids are constantly spying on people, and it's so cool. Like, it is like that's real like spy detective type stuff. Like, how awesome would that be to do something that you see adults do in movies and stuff? That's one of the fun things about this show. And so, Jamal has his tape recorder, and Alex is trying his extreme best to imitate like the Thapto people, because they have like a special way they do things. There's a special way they walk backwards. There's a hand gesture greeting that they do, and he has to try to remember that. Then they start doing this weird dance fighting type thing, and he's doing it. But then what gets him in trouble is that they all have special names they call themselves. They call themselves the same thing that the Double Defenders call themselves in the superhero books and stuff. And so 2 people go first. And so since there's only 4 members in both groups, there's only 2 names left. Alex has no idea which one he's supposed to be, so he just assumes that it's one of them. But it's the wrong one, because the person standing behind him is all like, that's my name. So then they want to know who he is, rips his mask off. And so they're like, ah, crap. So he dodges out of there. The Ghostwriter team, they head for the hills. They just are running. And the Thaptos are like right behind them. It's a chase. And it's like so intense. And so the gang decides to split up in 2. So Alex and his sister go in one direction and they get away. But Lenny and Jamal are not so fortunate. They're getting turned around, and they go down like a back alley. And so it's like there's a gate there, and they're like, oh crap, we're gonna get screwed. And so they're like, oh wait, I know what I can do. So he makes Lenny climb up the gate, and as he's about to climb it, the Thaptos catch him. And they literally threaten. They're like, man, we are about to jack you up. And Jamal's all like, maybe later. And then he like kicks one of them. So like he kicks one of them, and then he like grabs one by the head and like shoves that person down. And then he takes off running. That was just like a cool thing. Like, Jamal is the cool kid of the group. And so it's late at night, and I mean it's late at night too, because the time that they met was like 7 o'clock that night, but by the time they get home it's even later. And so the other kids are at Lenny's place, and they're just waiting for Jamal to come back, and he finally does, and they're so happy. And then when Lenny sees Jamal, she gives him a big hug. I'm telling you, man, they should have shipped those 2. And so now, since they know what 2 of the Thaptos look like, because the one girl that got mad at Alex for saying her name, she ripped her mask off. And so they know what another kid looks like because Alex saw his face. Also, that one girl that's friends with Gabby, she saw one of them people's faces too. And then they also know one of them name is Dan. So now that they have all the clues and all the evidence they need, they also has the tape recorder that recorded their little message of them talking about how they steal money. See, the reason why they steal money is because there's a Double Defenders tournament coming up, and they will want to be like the best of the best to show that they are. So in order to be the best of the best, they have to practice. And so they go to the arcade with lots of quarters because they steal people's lunch money. And so now that they have all the clues they need and all the evidence they need, now it's time to call the cops. And so when at the tournament, where the Thaptos are there playing, Jamal and the rest of the other Ghostwriter team come in with a bunch of kids who had their book bags stolen, their lunch money stolen, and they just start like ripping on like the Thapto people, exposing them. And the Thapto people like, ah crap, we're like had. And then they had the one girl that's Gabby's friend who saw the face and pointed them out. So then as they're trying to leave, Jamal's like standing in front of them with the rest of the kids. And so then he's like, we'll just let y'all go. And then next thing you know, the cop walks in through the door, like all cool and nonchalant. And those kids are busted. And so the Ghostwriter team saves the day. And after they hug it out, they're just kind of like, well, I guess this is it. We go our separate ways and stuff. And so they do. But then Jamal is like in his room, he's talking to Ghostwriter, and he's just kind of like, this just can't be it. So he gets an idea. He takes all the money he has and he heads down to the party animal. And when he comes back, he contacts the rest of the group. Now, they have a special way they contact each other. When Jamal was trying to read Double Defender's books, he just got too stressed out. And he told Ghostwriter he needs help trying to read all this stuff. Ghostwriter misinterpreted that and thought Jamal needed help. So he sends a message to all of the kids at the same time saying help Jamal. The kids don't know what that means, but they're worried. They think something's wrong with Jamal. So they rush over to his house. And he's all like, I'm fine, I just need help reading these books. And then they thought to themselves, oh, wait a minute. Ghostwriter can literally travel all throughout the city and message them all at the same time. Or at least, one at a time. And so they're like, this is how they can communicate with each other no matter where they're at. Because there were no cell phones back then. And if there were, they were like really huge. And there were pagers, but you know what I'm saying. So there was no instant messenger, nothing like that. No FaceTime, nothing. So, no text messaging. So, they figure out they can communicate with each other no matter where they're at through Ghostwriter, but they need like a special word that they can say and what a location to meet at. So they use the term rally because Alex said, like a car rally, you rally at a certain group. And so Jamal said, let's put our first initial of our name there, let us know whose house to go to. So he does the whole Rally J thing and they come to his place and he's telling them, what they did was great and they should keep it up because there's so much like stuff going on in the city. And if cops aren't going to be able to solve the cases, they should be able to solve the cases. So he suggests to them that they call themselves the Ghostwriter team. And he gives them these special pens that he made. And when these pens came out, people wanted them all the time, but they weren't really in the stores. And if they were, they didn't look exactly like that. So people like myself will make our own. And with these pens, what they are, it's just a pen that's kind of like a marker type thing, and they have like a string attached to it, like a little rope that you put around your neck. So no matter where they're at, they can always write the Ghostwriter in case they don't have a pen or something. And thus the Ghostwriter team was formed. However, they're missing a couple of people, like I said before. Tina has not joined the group yet. She was shown in the first episode, but Ghostwriter hasn't spoken to her yet. He later does in the third episode because the second episode is the original pilot. However, in the original pilot, yes, he does talk to her also too. And that correct person I told you about. So technically he talks to her, but that episode really doesn't count, but whatever. But it was still a good enough episode. But they felt like the show needed more, so that's why they created this new pilot, which is the one I just explained. And so he talks to Tina because each kid has their own special skill set. Jamal is the determined leader and the first person he talked to. Gabby is the nice person who looks for the empathy in people. Lenny is good with music and it's just all around smart. She's kind of like the main girl. Tina is like the news journalist type person. Alex is the person who's like all knows about like spies and codes and detective type stuff. Rob, who later on gets introduced, he's a poet. So he's really good with words. And Ghostwriter loves people who are good with words. As for the other two, they're just there because they needed like young people to be on the show because the teen cast was becoming a little bit older and they wanted to rebrand. They will go on some of the craziest adventures. Some of them a little low key because this is a kid show. You know what I'm saying? There was one episode where Alex is running for student body president, and so all of a sudden all these smear campaigns are about him, and they're factual. Like, there's some really embarrassing stuff, and nobody wants to vote for him because of all that embarrassing stuff. And it turns out Calvin is the one leaking all this stuff because he wants his friend to be the president. And he found all this stuff about Alex because Gabby told this one girl who's her pen pal, or no, Alex told, no, I think somebody told this girl who's a pen pal, I think it's Alex pen pal, and Alex pen pal turns out to be Calvin's cousin. So he exposes, and so there's the other episode where Rob, he befriends a homeless man who's also a poet, and he does kind of like this Def Jam type poetry type stuff, and it's really good. And it turns out that this homeless man one day went missing and his place got trashed. So Rob and everybody else thinks that something bad happened to him. Turns out this homeless man is a vet that suffers from PTSD, which is the first time I ever heard of that. And so, like, the homeless dude, his daughter's looking for him. So the whole gang is trying to determine what happened, who trashed his place and everything. His little homeless, like, shelter type place. It turns out that the homeless dude did it himself because he got frustrated because he got writer's block. And when he has that, he likes to go off on his own. One place he used to stay is this abandoned, like, sewer system that's abandoned for a reason. So Rob and the daughter goes down there and it caves in, right? And so they're trapped. Nobody knows where they're at. And so, you know, Rob is using like the little rock pebbles to spell, you know, the location of where they're at and stuff. There's another episode, which is probably one of the darkest ones ever. There's two really dark episodes. One, Tina befriends this former actress who's this big time actress. She's kind of like the Lucille Ball of her day. She's done all these movies, all these shows where she does all this action stuff. And it's like, so she's working for this lady doing her fan mail type stuff. And she starts to notice that this actress is getting threatening notes, death-defying threatening notes. So Tina is scared. And then all this strange stuff started happening. Like, you know, they'll be on set one day and like the camera will fall or something like that, you know, and it almost killed her and stuff. And so the gang is trying to figure out who would want to kill this famous actress and stuff. And so they start like doing like the clue thing, the solving stuff, the mystery stuff, the detective stuff. And then they determine that this former actress has a lot of people she's pissed off in the past to hold grudges. But one of the people who holds the grudges the most is her former stunt double person, because she feels that she is the true actress because she did all the stunts and Lana did not, the actress lady. And so one thing that the lady does that's pretty dark is she plans on kidnapping the actress and exposing her. But Rob, poor Rob, he determines whose it is. And as he's like, you know, in the dressing room, the criminal person takes a blunt object and knocks him out cold and ties him up. And this is a kid's show I'm telling you about. This happened. Then there's another episode where Jamal goes to England because he's doing like this little exchange type thing. And so the other kids don't get to go because they're like, you know, the show don't have that budget. So they're only able to send one. And so while he's there, turns out there's these people that are criminals and they plan on kidnapping the child of a famous author, and they're gonna ransom him off for money. And this actually happens. So Ghostwriter is going back and forth from England to America, and it's like really like pulling on him, you know, he's like a little teeny tiny ghost. And so while he's there, Ghostwriter befriends the other two British kids that help Jamal out. And Jamal's like running all around England, you know, trying to solve the case and running from the bad guy. And they're really trying to get Jamal. I mean, they're trying to get him, you know. And it's just like, it was just like weird to see that on the kids' show. These grown adults kidnapping a little small boy and ransoming him off, you know. You just don't see that normally on a kids' show. And then there's this other episode where it's like time travel is involved. And it's a really good episode. Like, what it was is that when the kids are, I think Rob was about to leave or something like that. And all of a sudden, Ghostwriter reads a message where a boy is asking for help. He don't know who this boy is or where he's at. He's just like, I have to go there. So he goes. Next thing you know, Ghostwriter's been gone for a couple of weeks, probably like a month and stuff. And the kids got worried. They thought Ghostwriter left him for like some other kids or something. Then Ghostwriter comes back and he's all like, "There's this kid named Frank. He needs help." And they're like, "Where is Frank?" And he's all like, "I don't know." And he's all like, "He's in the house." And they're all like, "This house?" And they're like, "Yeah." And the address of the house. And they're like, they don't understand how Frank needs help, and he's inside Jamal's house. That's what it's at. And so it's determined that Frank lived about, let's see, what was it? Frank is from 1928, and this show took place in around 1994, I'll say. And so it's like they don't understand how Ghostwriter was able to go back in time and talk to his kids, but he's able to go through time by going through like the books and some weird time travel stuff that they never explain. But it takes a toll on Ghostwriter to the point where he becomes super weak. And why Frank needs help is because back in the day, okay, Frank is kind of like a foster kid. And he gets taken in by this wealthy type of family. And, Frank would be friends like the girl that lives there. And they like foster a brother and sister, something like that. And because Frank is a former criminal too. He used to pickpocket people. And so the waiting staff there, they don't like Frank because he's a former criminal, this and that. And so some stuff goes missing one day. And of course, who they gonna blame? They're gonna blame Frank. And because of that, he got sent away in actual like time. So when he's writing that he needs help, Ghostwriter reads that, goes back in time, and him and the modern day Ghostwriter team, they change and alter history to help Frank out. Because, Ghostwriter, he exposes himself to some two kids that's back in 1928. And so they help determine, so both teams are helping determine who stole the silverware that they framed it on Frank. Turns out it was this guy who would pretend to be like a door-to-door salesman. He ends up stealing it. So they end up saving the day, and Frank's name gets cleared. Now this has a really interesting story. Why it's so important that Frank has to be saved, because Ghostwriter tells them that if Frank is not saved and name is cleared, Jamal will never be born. And so they're just kind of like, what's going on and stuff like that. And so in the present day, Jamal's dad is dying because he had some kind of like heart condition or something like that. Oh, by the way, they recast his dad. It's no longer Samuel L. Jackson. He was only in the two pilots. And so it turns out that Frank grows up to be a doctor. Now, I did mess up a little bit. I said Jamal will never be born. Okay, it's either that or he's the doctor who came up with this surgical technique that will help Jamal's dad heart condition. So I think it's that. It's not that Jamal won't be born, because Jamal is born, but or something like that. It's something. So anyway, so yeah, Frank is the one who came up with this technique as a doctor that helped save Jamal's dad's life. And so in the present day, they meet this old woman. Turns out to be the little girl that Ghostwriter talked to back in 1928. And she said that, her and Frank, they fell in love, they got married. Frank became a doctor, a surgeon, and that he later died a few years ago. So they didn't get to meet him. And that, that technique he came up with helped save Jamal's dad's life and stuff. And these kids are always going up against a lot of bad people that always want to hurt them too. Like one time they had this community garden thing, and Gabrielle got sick, and then some rabbits had died. Turns out somebody was polluting the garden with all these toxic chemicals, because they were dumping their toxic waste instead of doing it the safe way and paying lots of money. That people used to do that all the time back in the old days. So they expose this like chemical company that's doing it, and they going on some deep heavy cover like stuff, and they getting chased once again, and these kids are always putting themselves in some really like dangerous situations. And that what was so great about this show is that you had these little kids, and they was always in these like threatening like situations and taking down these major bad guys. that the cops could never figure out, you know? I mean, there was one episode where Lenny's dad and Alex and Gabby's dad was in this huge argument. And so because the two parents got into a huge argument, Lenny and Alex got into and Gabby got into an argument, which caused the entire group to like split up. And what caused the argument was that, okay, not Hector, but what's his name? Alex's dad. He owns this food store, a grocery store, and so he's driving like the food truck type thing, and he runs over Lenny's dad's musical instruments. That costs a lot of stinking money. And the reason why he did that is because he was swerving because he saw somebody in a hoodie running. And so, you know, Lenny's dad doesn't believe that, doesn't that. So in a way, they're doing the detective type stuff. And next thing you know, when things are all about to be better, Lenny's dad sues Alex's dad, which causes a bigger rift. So the kids that aren't fighting with each other, like Rob and Jamal and Tina, they need to figure out, you know, what caused this accident. And it's determined that both stories, even though both men saw two different things, because it happened so fast. But one thing they remember seeing is a person in a hoodie. And that's the person that Alex's dad tried to like swerve and avoid. Turns out the guy in the hoodie, he was running in the street because he stole a very expensive and valuable painting from a museum, and he was hauling butt. And so you know what made this show just so great is, like I said before, you got to interact with the cast, the characters. You know, you got to sit at home as they was jotting down all the clues. You was writing them down too. You know, you were trying to solve the mystery before they could solve the mystery. It was a nice interactive type show with a cast that had a nice flow. They had a nice symmetry. The cast really felt like they was friends. Their parents who played them, played their parents, they acted like they was their real parents. Like they acted so lovey-dovey, you know, and it just felt so real. You felt that connection. You felt the connection of being in Brooklyn, New York. There was this one episode where Rob befriends a former gang member, and this former gang member is being framed for a whole lot of bad stuff because a bunch of people are getting beat up by this gang and stuff. And nobody wants to believe this kid because he used to be a bad seed. But Rob is determined to prove that this guy is, you know, a good guy. And Rob gets entangled with his gang because Ghostwriter helped take him to the location. And Rob gets the crap beat out of him by this gang and stuff. And, you know, there's a character, the former gang member dude, the reason why he stopped being in that gang is because his brother got shot. And they show his brother in a wheelchair from what happened, him being paralyzed from being shot. And this was a kid's show. You know, it was very mature for its time. There's one episode where a girl is like a computer hacker, and she's one of those type of people who's like an only child. She gets no attention. She goes around school, nobody pays attention to her at school, so she determines she's going to make people pay attention to her by means of hacking. And when she hacks everything in the school system. She's setting off alarm. You know, she's changing records, she's changing grades, she's hacking into like the fire department type place. Like she's like a really bad girl, and the team along with Ghostwriter is helping to, like, you know, stop her. And this is one of those internet episodes where it's like, you know, they're using all kind of like outdated slang terms, and they're trying to teach people what the internet was. And this is when Jamal gets like a modem from his computer and he's able to go in the chat rooms and stuff. It was around that time. It was around like 1995 or so. There's also a drug episode where Alex is distanced from the rest of the group, and he's constantly hanging out with these basketball guys who are doing drugs, but he doesn't do drugs himself, but they like put it in his book bag for him to hide it from him, and his parents find out, so they think he's doing drugs, so now they have to clear Alex's name. And then when Alex is trying to figure out, you know, the kid who had these drugs, which is his friend, he chases him down, but then his friend has like a heart attack because he's ODing and everything. And it was just like a really powerful episode. So it's like you just don't see that with the newer series. Well, you kind of see it a little bit with the 1997 series. With the CBS 1997 reboot, it's like these kids are like junior detectives solving crimes, but we don't know why. There's never no origin story. We don't know why they have a love for solving crimes. We don't. They're like, when they do solve crimes, there's no casebook, there's no special pens, they're not deciphering codes. The clues that they are giving happen so quickly in the show because there's only 13 episodes. It's a typical 22-minute show, just like the other ones are. And so what case they have to solve happens in that one episode. So we get where a bad thing happens, and then they go throughout the show trying to solve it. And they have clues, but they rush through the clues like super fast. So you don't have time to like decipher things, and they don't repeat things to help you like stay in your head. And then they save the day. And it's like, it's just a very rushed show. Like I said before, it was 2 years after the other show. We don't know why Ghostwriter went to Canada for. And so it's like okay, the first episode, okay, they're at school, and something bad happens where all the kids are gathering around the school, and the janitor is being taken away in handcuffs. And it turns out that the principal's little pilot palm thing, which is basically like it's like a mix between like a tablet and a laptop, and it's really tiny. It goes missing. He assumes it's the janitor because the janitor is a former criminal. He stole stuff when he was younger and got sent off, stuff like that. And so Strick, he's like, oh man, I feel bad because the janitor's such a nice guy. We have to like save this guy and stuff. Well, you know, Camilla doesn't want to because she thinks he's like a criminal. And as for Emily, Emily's just like, okay, whatever. But then Emily overhears the principal saying that he wished he never hired him, but Emily's dad recommended him. So Emily's kind of like, well, why would my dad recommend this criminal for? And that's how the case gets started. So they're asking Ghostwriter for help, you know, to determine why her dad will, like, you know this dude. And Ghostwriter sends them a message talking about prison, this, that, block, this, and the number, and some strange message. And she's like, oh my God, my dad used to be a criminal. And so they go into her attic, they're looking through all the old stuff, and they're seeing her dad. He's be part of like a band. And so she's now determined, thinking her dad's like this criminal. So she confronts her dad. Dad, why didn't you tell me you was in prison? Blah, 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 blah. He's like, what are you talking about? She's like, I know you're a part of the blah, 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 blah. And he's like, oh, no, you got it wrong. See, he used an anagram for his band's name. And it stood for rhythm and blues. And the prison cell block number was some kind of name they came up with. And he was never a prisoner. He knew the janitor because they used to be in the band together. And so she's like, okay. And so then next thing you know, Strick and Camilla, they get into an argument because he's like, you know, you shouldn't judge people, blah, 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 because of the past, blah, 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 stuff like that. And so she's like, and so within seconds, she's all like, okay, I'll change my ways. And so then when a group of girls start like gossiping and making fun of the dude, she tells them that, you know, that's wrong and blah, 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 stuff like that. So she learned her lesson within a couple of seconds. And it's kind of like, it takes a little bit longer than that. And so they're talking to the janitor dude, and they ask him about his past. And he's like, yeah, you know, I used to mess up. I used to do this, I used to do that. And I was a kid, they just sent me away and tried me as an adult. And then, so they're trying to determine more and more what's going on. He said, you know, they asked me if you have any enemies. He's like, oh, no, you know, what I do is just like, you know, whenever I see kids doing things in school they shouldn't be doing, I make them stop. And so they're like, okay, well, it must be one of the kids that like setting him up. And so they asked him for a list of like, you know, the kid's name. And he just said the last kid that he helped was this one guy. So they're like, okay, it must be this one guy. So then they asked Ghostwriter, you know, look in his book bag and see if you can help determine, you know, if the thing got stolen and blah, blah. So Ghostwriter finds a bunch of weird names on there. He finds that the principal's mother's name and the mother's phone number and stuff. And then he has all these weird letters. Now, like, these letters look weird. What kind of this? And then she's like, oh, wait a minute. I know these letters. This is how letters are arranged on a keyboard. And so they determined that, you know, the Palm Pilot thing is inside that one kid's book bag. And so two of the kids are like running to go tell the principal, while the other kids distracting the bad kid and stuff like that. And so, you know, Next thing you know, the principal doesn't believe them at first, but then they're like, what's your mother's name? And then they tell them the mother's name. And then, so then they run in to find the kid, and they're all like, let me see your book bag. And he's like, what? This is an invasion of privacy. And then you know, he takes the palm pilot out the dude's book bag. He's all like, why did you set up the janitor? He's all like, well, the janitor got him in trouble, so he needed to frame the janitor. He didn't want to get in trouble. So he stole the principal's palm pilot thing and just, you know, blackmailed the janitor because he just didn't want to get in trouble for doing something else. And it's just like, okay, whatever, I can see that happening. But it's like, when they try to figure out the clues, they had only a couple of clues and they rushed through them like super fast. And it's like, it didn't give you time to like figure out what's really going on in this show. You just had to take their word for it and stuff. And it was super rushed. Now, I will say about the 1997 show, it's closer to the original one because they're actually solving crimes and stuff. But their crimes are kind of so lacklusterly, kind of boring, and it happens so fast that you just don't get invested in it. The kids have like no chemistry with each other. Their characters around them are kind of like buffoonish. Like the principal is like so comedic, it's like baffling. The kids don't even have chemistry with their own parents on the show. It just seems so out of place, and it's like, nobody knows why Ghostwriter picked these three kids. They don't have any special skills. They don't do a lot of writing. So it's just like, why does he like them so much? Now, in this show, Ghostwriter's appearance does change a little bit. He still looks the same as the one from PBS, but he's more metallic looking. He only has 2 different colors. In the original one, he has multiple colors. And in the new one, he's just a ball of light. Now, I will say this. I do like the new updated version of Ghostwriter, the ball of light thing. It looks nice. I just wish they would have added the 2 little line things at top. Make them look like a real Ghostwriter, you know? The metallic one from the 1997 one looks terrible. Now, when it comes to this episode, ironically, it's very similar to the original episode that had to deal with Rob and that former gang member. However, in the original episode, that was handled a million times better than the rebooted episode. Another thing on the show, they don't explain why the 3 kids call him GW. GW is short for Ghostwriter. It's a name that came up in the original one. See, when the kids wanted to talk to Ghostwriter, they kept spelling his name out, and it was so long, they got tired of spelling Ghostwriter out. So they just abbreviated it to just GW, and it made sense. And they explained why they did this, you know. And in the 1997 one, is never explained. They just straight up call him GW. They don't even really call him Ghostwriter for that much. And it's just like, why did they give him that name for? As for the 2019 one, okay, like I said before, because he's moving things around like a ghost, that's why they call him Ghost. And because he wrote to them one time and one time only, they call him Ghostwriter. And then within a couple of seconds after determining that, the youngest girl, Donna, so like, let's call him GW for short. And it's just like, why? They don't talk to him. They don't have to spell his name out. Why are they calling him GW for? And they only doing that because of the original one. So it doesn't really have that same feels to it, you know? They're just copying the original one. And it also doesn't explain why these kids are the only ones that can see him. Let's talk a little bit about this show. Now, this show, like I said before, starts with Ruben. He's the new kid. He's shy. He doesn't have no friends. He eats his lunch in the hallway instead of the cafeteria because he has no friends. Well, he does know Siobhan, but they're not really like close, but they know each other because she always going to his grandfather's bookstore, library type thing. Anyway, so he's out sitting by himself in the hallway eating his lunch, and Ghostwriter decides, and then there's a group of kids walking by, some basketball players. One of those people is Curtis. Ghostwriter decides, okay, I'm gonna bring Ruben and Curtis together and have them be friends because they've never talked to each other before. So he does something that causes Curtis to trip. Curtis thinks Ruben did it. Curtis ends up hurting his arm. He plays basketball, but he doesn't, for some reason, he didn't want to play. So he's not mad at Ruben because he's kind of happy that he messed his arm up. Then one day, but he is mad, but just not like mad, you know what I'm saying? And so like, what is it? Ruben's at his grandfather's workplace, the little bookstore place, and Donna and Curtis had to go there for some reason. I forget why. And Siobhan's there. She's talking to him because she knew his grandma and stuff like that. His grandma is deceased. And so Ghostwriter decides, okay, I'm going to bring all 4 of these kids together because Donna and Curtis are the brother and sister, and Siobhan and Ruben are like kind of like friends, kind of. So I'm going to bring them together. And so he exposes himself. He knocks over some orange juice and he writes in the orange juice. Ghostwriter does. They're freaking out, this and that. And then, they don't understand what this thing is and why it's talking to them. Then they go out into the street. They try to talk to him again. So they're like, okay, well, he talked to us doing orange juice. So let's spill some orange juice and write that way. At some point in time, he talks to them again or something like that, but it's very briefly. And so now they're all like, wow, this is cool. We can only see this thing, but how come we're the only ones that can see it? And they're now brought together by that. And it's like, but why? So... and then next thing you know, when they're at school, they start seeing a rabbit hopping around, walking around, running around with clothes on, talking about, I'm late for a very important date. Who is that? The White Rabbit from Alice in Wonderland, voiced by Neil Patrick Harris. And so they're like, how in the world did this thing come out from the book? Somehow they determine, oh, it's Ghostwriter somehow. And then next thing you know, the Mad Hatter is in a room by himself, and he's just being mad as always. And so the rabbit's there too. And so I'm thinking to myself, okay, there must be like fantastic beats and where to find them, because they must have to track down like the story characters and put them back in the book, which they eventually do. But here's the thing. The rabbit is the only one running around wreaking havoc everywhere. He's knocking stuff over, he's digging holes, he's doing this and that. And so the kids are constantly chasing after him. But of course, nobody can see the rabbit but them. It seems that when Ghostwriter can only take things out the book, he only lets those 4 kids only see those characters and stuff. So people think they're crazy running around talking to themselves and stuff like that. Then the rabbit's in the classroom talking to one of the students and this and that. And of course, they're getting in trouble for it. And they get in trouble also when this one room is completely ransacked and the principal sees them in the room but cannot see the Mad Hatter or see the rabbit there. So when they all go to the teacher's, the principal's office, the Mad Hatter's there, the rabbit's there, and the Queen of Hearts is there. Where did she show up from? Nobody knows. And so 3 of the kids are there. Donna is on her own little mission because she found Alice herself. But Alice gave her a little bit of food, and now they both shrunk. And nobody can see them, and nobody can find them. So Curtis is all like worried, because he's like, oh, where's my sister at? I can't find her. And because before that, he was being mean to her, kind of like how Alex is to Gabby. And so he's being mean to his sister, and now he's all worried for his sister. And then, so when the principal, they're talking to all the kids, Ruben confesses just to confess so they can all leave, and they all talk and they bond and they become friends, like, oh, you shouldn't take the blame, blah blah blah, we all take the blame, blah blah, stuff like that. And so then the Queen of Hearts, she's all like, oh wow, that was so like inspiring, I miss my sisters, that's why I'm so mean, because they won't talk to me no more, and maybe when I go back into the book, we'll start talking again. And then the kids bond over that, and then the Mad Hatter and then before that, the rabbit, he's like, oh, I know where your sister probably at. I can find Alice. So he sniffs out, finds her, and then they give her some more food, and they both grow. And then they go back into the book, all 4 of them. And they're all like, well, and so then it's kind of like, Curtis is all like, oh, I should be a lot nicer to you, and blah, blah, blah. And, that one character helped me realize that. But then, of course, in the rest of the series, he's still mean to her. And then, so, the other kids, they like, oh, we learned our lesson. What lesson was that? Don't know. And so, this is what this show is about. It's not about them solving crimes and mysteries and criminal type stuff. Basically, what it is Ghostwriter needs help. Don't know why. He bringing a bunch of fictional characters alive. Why? Don't know why. And then the characters help the kids in whatever personal situation they're going through to their character development and stuff. And that's what the show is about. It's about them learning life lessons, but they learn their life lessons so fast, it literally in the blink of an eye. And the thing I have a problem with the show is that One is not Ghostwriter. Two, Ghostwriter doesn't do this. And three, when they learn their life lessons, like I said, it goes by really fast. You learn what you learn what their drama is, because the show is kind of like a drama slash comedy, but mostly a comedy. But it's some dramatic moments, like Donna and Curtis. Their parents are divorced, and they only live with one parent at a time. And so, and so it's kind of like you'll see the drama stuff happen, and then they go through their shenanigans with the characters from the books, and then at the end of the day, they're all like, "Wow, I learned a valuable lesson." But it happens so fast. It's kind of like, how'd you learn it? And it's kind of like, it's one of those things where it's kind of like the 1997 show. They determine things very quickly. It's like as soon as something happens, they think for a second, "Oh wait, I know why this is this, and so it must be because of this and that." And so I figured it out. And that's how this series is. It goes by clues and things so fast that you don't have time to decipher and take it in and stuff. And then the characters go right back in the book. And that's literally the premise of the entire series. It's just characters coming out of the book, they learn a life lesson, and it goes back in there. Now now I decided, okay, look, I'm not watching this series no more. I watched the first episode, the first story arc, the first two episodes in the first season. But then I saw a trailer, and I'm like, okay, this looks pretty better than what I saw in that first episode, so I'm gonna keep with it. So I decided to watch the second season, first episode story arc. And now, for some reason, Ghostwriter is he's still bringing people out the book, but Ruben is a painter, and he starts painting the stuff, and it's coming to life off the page. And it's like, why is this going on? When the other kids do it, it doesn't happen. Turns the paintbrush is magical because it came from a book. So every time Ruben paints with it, those characters come alive, and everything seems to be good. He painted Donna and Curtis a bigger apartment. He made Siobhan a know-it-all, that way she can help her with her schoolwork and activities, because she has a lot school activities that she does, and she don't have enough time for them. And he created a lucky armband so Curtis can play basketball and make every shot. And he also created a little dragon for reasons. Well, the armband causes Curtis to be like a ball hog, and he will not pass the ball to nobody, and he makes every shot. That pisses off his teammates and nearly gets them kicked off the team. Siobhan's little double is a smart mouth rude person who thinks she knows everything, and she constantly screws everything up for Siobhan. The apartment that what's the face created for them, it's more money than the dad can handle, so he has to take two jobs, and the dragon tears everything up. And so he's all like, okay, I need to get rid of these things. Turns out there's a character in the book that also came alive too. She's this selfish, greedy little girl. And so when they determined that out, she steals the brush, and then they had to get it back from her. She wants to be painted in front of a bank vault full of tons of money. He tricks her. He paints her back into the book. And then they all determine, I made all this stuff for y'all personal gain, but it screwed y'all up. And it was greedy of us. So now they learned their lesson. Now they have to put everything back in the book, but they can't. So he decides to paint everybody on an alien planet, and all the stuff that he made come alive on an alien planet. And then so they sent them on an alien planet because he has no way to because he can't put the double Siobhan in the book because she didn't come from a book. She came from a page. Now, as for the armband, that don't make no sense, because in order to make it, he had to draw it on Curtis. But if he would have done that, then it would have been two Curtis. So that's not really explained that well. And so the paintbrush does not go away after that. They learned their lesson. Then all of a sudden, Ghostwriter takes the paintbrush and he paints a book they've never heard of. And the book comes alive. And then the paintbrush finally goes back into its original book. And they're all like, well, why did Ghostwriter paint this? He must want us to read this book. So then they open the pages and it's blank. So now they have to determine something. If Ghostwriter could do that all along, why doesn't Ghostwriter just use his abilities to move things around and help himself? That don't make no sense. I'm assuming, this is what I surmise, that this Ghostwriter is very weak. That's why he doesn't speak to him that much. When he does speak, it's like one little word, one sentence, like help me or something like that. And then he started typing on the typewriter to them, saying like help me and all this other mess. And so it's like, he'll say like hello. And so it's like, okay, so he must be weak. and he can't do things on his own, but yet somehow he has enough strength to bring characters out of a book. And so it doesn't make no sense. And it doesn't make sense why they're not solving crimes and why they're just learning life lesson goals. Now, in one episode I did not watch, and I'm not watching, but I saw the trailer for it. This one girl comes out of a book, and all of a sudden there's like these little blue magical balls flying everywhere. These are memory balls from the actual real life people who hold the books and read them. And somehow they get a magical power. So the kids start touching the little blue balls, and they have to save the day and get the magic powers. Why? I don't know. This is just a weird series, and it's kind of okay. Before I get into that, let me explain something I said a long time ago with the original series with Ghostwriter and the kids. Remember how I said Ghostwriter was asking what the kids are, he has to help the kids and all this other stuff? The reason why he is so attached to little kids is because the original creator of the original show intended for Ghostwriter. See, when the kids were trying to figure out who Ghostwriter was, they said they're gonna figure out who he is in real life and help him. And so they started asking him a bunch of questions about his past and things that he remembered. He remembers being a man, he remembers looking after kids, and he remembers running away from dogs. But that's all he remembers. After this, they decided to drop that storyline. The creators said that Ghostwriter was intended to be a runaway slave. That is why he has a fear of dogs and being chased by them. And he was a runaway slave that could actually read, and he would help other slaves be free too, and he would teach them how to read. But his most concern was he wanted to protect the kids that were like runaway slaves, and he would teach them how to read. And when the slave owners started to come back looking for him, he would try to protect the kids. That ended up costing him his life. And because he was trapped in Jamal's book for so many years, he forgot who he was. And it was also determined, the creator said, that the reason why he was in Jamal's book, because it belonged to his great-grandfather, or his grandfather, I can't remember which one, is because, his deceased grandfather, is because Ghostwriter was supposed to be related to Jamal's family line. And that's why he was in Jamal's book and stuff, or grandfather's book. But that storyline got scrapped because the network just didn't want to do that. So that's why he has a fondness for kids, because he used to protect the kids from the slave owners and stuff. And that's why he has a vast knowledge and wants to read a lot, because he actually knew how to read back in the time when you weren't allowed to read, and he used to teach other people. So they started giving little clues to that, but they didn't go as far. The 1997 show doesn't do anything about that. And as for the 2019 one, Ruben assumes that this ghostwriter is his dead grandmother, because she recently just died. She met Ruben and all of them first. Well, she met Ruben first before she met the other ones. And it's like, she typed on this old typewriter, I think used to belong to her and stuff. So he thought it was her. Anyways, at some point they realized it's not her. Who is this ghostwriter? Nobody knows. What does this ghostwriter need help with? Nobody knows. Why this ghostwriter can't help himself or herself? Nobody knows. And it's just like, why was this show created the way it was? I get it. Like, it's supposed to be for young kids and everything. So they catered this to young kids. But so was the other two. But the other two are a lot more mature than that. Also, with this new series, why did they change everything around to where Ghostwriter doesn't even act like Ghostwriter and does all this weird magical stuff? If they wanted to make a magical kid show, just make a magical kid show, you know? And another thing is kind of like, how do kids really even know who or what Ghostwriter is? Because, you know, it's out of print, the DVDs aren't sold no more, the books aren't sold no more. Maybe they stumble across it on the internet, on YouTube, because every episode's on YouTube. Maybe their parents were talking to them about it. Maybe their parents saw the old VHS and DVDs of it. But other than that, kids don't really act like they're invested in Ghostwriter. So it's kind of like, I get it. I think the show was made for two people. One, it was made for, of course, little kids, because they want to make money off this. But they want to make money off the memory of us older kids. So technically, this show is kind of was meant to draw us older viewers in, So we can be like, oh my God, it's Ghostwriter. That's how I was when I heard about this show. When I heard about this show, I was like jumping for joy. I'm like, yes, like this is gonna be awesome. I get to relive a show that I loved as a kid. Um, I'm gonna get to see it doing like modern time with updated technology and stuff, updated CGI. This is gonna be great. And now with computers and tablets and all this other stuff and smartphones, this show is gonna be like awesome. You know what I'm saying? And then they go and completely, and then that hooked me in, like it hooked in a lot of other people. And then we saw it, and then we're just like, well, this ain't Ghostwriter. And then of course we told the younger people that, and they're like, oh, well, we like it and stuff. And I don't understand why little kids like it, because the little life lessons that they learn, it goes by super duper quick. And they have like 3 episodes to go through all these like life lesson type stuff. And it just, or 2 episodes sometimes, and it just goes by really quick. And it's just like, so it's kind of like, okay, I can understand what kids might like the idea of um fairy tale characters coming to life and everything, but in some episodes they barely interact with those fairy tale people coming to life. Like in the first episode, they really didn't interact with the Queen of Hearts all that much, and they barely interacted with the Mad Hatter. They mostly just interacted with the rabbit. And it wasn't like in those cool, like no shenanigan kind of way. It was just they was interacting with it. Same with the little dragon and that stuff in the paintings. And it's just like, I guess in other episodes they might interact with people a lot more and characters a lot more, but I didn't see that in the first episode. And the first episode should be like your big bam hurrah type thing. So I can see what kids might like that, but the life lessons they're learning, they're not really learning that much, and there's not that much interaction with the fairy tale characters. Like in Just Add Magic, you really learned life lessons in that, and you really got to see the magic happen. And it's just like in this show, it's just not like that. And it's just like, I don't think this is even like a good kid show, because I've seen other better kid shows that deal with magic or life lessons type stuff. And so it's kind of like, and then this show got renewed for a second season. Is it gonna get renewed for a third? I don't know, because the second season only had 7 episodes. First had 13, and then so it is kind of like it might last because little kids are interested in it, but you have to pay for this show. It's on Apple Plus. That's the thing, and so it's like. And Apple Plus has a lot more adult type shows. I really just don't see this show lasting all that long. But then again, it might just. And it's just like the kids on the show, their acting's okay, but it's not as great or stellar as the original series. None of these kids have like really good chemistry with like the other characters and stuff. And it's just like, I don't understand the purpose of this show. Like, I really don't. And it's like, if you wanted to bring an older property back for younger kids, why not do it the same way that it did it, or bring like a one that will like appeal more to kids? Alrighty, well, I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.